Looks like we're live. We're just going to pause here momentarily, wait for some people to jump on here. If you are joining in early, my name is Brent Gill. I'm broadcasting live off of the shorelines at Piney Point Resort on Sheridan Lake. And joining us this evening is the well-known ex-regional fisheries biologist and the master of Stillwater's Brian Chan. And Brian, where are you broadcasting from this evening?
From beautiful Kamloops, which actually rained today. We had some rain, which is very foreign.
Yeah, we had rain in the Caribou here today, up at 3,600 feet, and it definitely knocked down some of the snow, but still have looks like over a foot of ice and not a lot of shoreline melt out here on Sheridan, just out the window there. But let's talk a little bit about this early spring so far. I've been watching your social media, Brian, and see that you're not only just angling already, you're catching fish. So maybe let the viewers know kind of where you've been so far.
Well, it definitely a later. Well, actually, it's a more. This is what our springs used to be like, and
right.
I can remember many years ago when we decided, for all the trophy lakes, we would have a May 1 opening, and that's because they were still frozen up until May 1. And so I can look at my diaries from 25, 30 years ago and see that lakes like Roche Lake and Pass Lake didn't come off until the 7th and 9th of May, and sometimes even later. So we've been kind of getting used to early ice offs, shorter winters. But this one that we're in right now is a little bit longer. And right now in the Kamloops area, you basically only have 3 lakes to fish, and they're all all 3 are low elevation grassland lakes, and all where most of our lakes are 3,000 feet and above. It's still winter, as you can attest to what's up in the southern Caribou.
And that's ideally something that I think as newer anglers, people are going to start getting used to is you got to be pretty flexible. And a lot of these, 5-year calendar terms where lakes are coming off at a certain time, it's disposable information now. Things can change drastically year to year. And it's interesting. I'd love to see that journal that you were talking about, and maybe we can scan it and put it online. But B is that these historical ice off dates are not that far off from the regular old days, not that far back. Interesting. So so far with your we're not going to call it a late spring, we're just going to call it spring now. So far, have you noticed anything different and concerns to hatches or water conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brent, because it's a very strange thing I've seen this year on basically the 2 lakes that came off first in the Kamloops area were 6 Mile and Morgan, which are always the first 2. And on 6 Mile Lake, with the lake still 2/3 covered in ice, there were pretty good chironomid hatches, and they were not minute. They were 20s, 18s, and 20s, and we were having some pretty interesting shore fishing with chironomid pupa casting to the edges of the ice. And I honestly, in all the years that I fished that lake, I've never seen that before. And the same thing with Stump Lake, which came off about 8 or 9 days after 6 Mile. It was from the get-go, there were chironomids hatching, and even though they were very small, the fish would key on. You could catch fish on an 18-2X, no problem. And so I've even heard reports from ice fishermen that have been fishing late winter and drilling several holes, and during the day they had chironomids coming up through the hole.
Wow.
So
yeah.
I think the insects are even anxious to get this rather difficult winter behind them.
Now, for those that are viewing this evening and are maybe newer to the Stillwater entomology, Brian, generally chironomids emerge what you would normally date as post turnover, ideally when the column's a certain temperature.
Yeah, no, normally the bulk of the chironomid hatches start after spring turnover, and we start getting surface temperatures up into the high, the 47, 48 Fahrenheit. But if the water's warm, in shallow water under the ice, it's always going to be warmer than it is at the surface. It's enough to progress the development of those larvae so that they metamorphose to the pupa, and then the pupa pop out. So they're just, it's just something we don't see on every lake, that's for sure.
Right.
Not on every year.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, something's indicating them from the bottom to get going already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was good. I'm not complaining. That's good.
Well, thanks for joining anyone that's popped in on the live feed tonight. We do have a bunch of different topics that we're going to scroll through. We're also going to watch a video, one of spring primer here up next with Brian and Jason Tonelli. And so we'll have a little view at that. This is the first showing of this Fishing BC feature. Enjoy this video, and we'll get back to a whole plethora of topics.
I grew up fishing Heffley Lake when I was a kid, probably like 6 or 7 years old. But saltwater guiding kind of had me busy for the last 15 years. But the last 2 or 3 years, I've been lake fishing a lot. There's so much opportunity and the adventure factor. And I think when you talk to a lot of fishermen too, although, catching the fish is fun, preparation and getting ready for a trip and planning a trip, that's a big part of it for me. The fish are here, river fishing could be a bad run, could be a good run, but lakes, they're here. They're not going anywhere. You just got to crack that code. And that's what I love doing, is getting out here and taking the clues that Mother Nature's giving you and putting all that knowledge to work, putting all that preparation to work, and trying to figure out the code. And when you get it right, it's amazing. There's nothing like it.
Hey, Jake, how are you?
Good to see you, buddy.
Hey.
Looking forward to today.
First time that Jason and I have been able to fish together. I'm pretty sure between the two of us, we're going to figure them out today. The best part about lake fall fishing is that the fish are in shallow water, and so we don't have to go out into deep water and try to find them. We know where the grocery store is this time of year, and it's shallow water. Oh, Jason's on. Happy. There we go. Yeah. Jason getting them on the fast stripping or tractor patterns, but looks like they might start to go on the indicator, which is good because we both love watching that strike indicator drifting down.
That's a beauty. Oh, nice. That's the one right there, man. It's been 15 years. We've threatened to go fishing together many, many times, but He's catching bigger fish. That's for sure. I think we're actually pretty much 50-50.
Oh, we got another one. That's officially a triple header.
I was just clearing out the turbos for him, making the coast clear so he could catch the big one.
Big ones have got a high metabolism and they got to eat. So they want to bulk up as much as they can before going into winter. At least in my experience, is the biggest fish I catch every year are in the fall months, late fall.
Today we're on a different lake. A lot of water to cover, so got to put in our time and see what happens, but there's a chance for a trophy for sure. On the bigger lakes, this time of year, the fish are moving around a lot, so it might be good in a certain bay for 2 or 3 hours. One day you go there, the next day, and the fish aren't even there. It is what it is. That's lake fishing, so you just got to adapt and work hard for them. We still got some time. We'll see what happens here in the next couple hours.
Oh, it's a challenging day. Fish are not being very cooperative, but we've managed to find a few. But there we go. Jason had to go looking around a lot. But when the fishing's tough, you got to move.
Yeah, we're still working hard for them, but we're switching up and we're making it happen.
The fall, in particular, late fall, is a special time of the year. Fish are moving into shallower water to feed, and there's far less other anglers on the water. Great company and catching fish. Can't ask for anything more.
That was awesome.
Well, if that doesn't get you pumped for the season.
Yeah, that was a fun 2 days fishing with Jason, that's for sure.
Yeah, spectacular too. And we all know how hard it is to get those indicator down shots and those jump shots. And that's a great one.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're just joining in, thanks again. My name is Brent Gill, and this is next to me, the well-known Brian Chan. And this is our first live feed of 2023 Stillwater season primer. If you do have any questions, enter them in, and some of them pop up periodically, and we'll try our best to get to answering those questions later on in the feed. We do have numerous different topics surrounding the Stillwater season, safety, winter kill, all sorts of stuff. So we'll jump right into what we're going to kind of label for today and this evening as kind of the elephant in the room, or the elephant under the ice, or however you want to put it. But there's a lot of information that's been floating around, of course, because of, we're in the age of information with the internet. And there's quite a bit of talk about some winter kill issues, Brian, in Region 3 and potentially in Region 5. And maybe you can explain to us, maybe get a clear detail perhaps of the situation in whole and why kind of this would have been the perfect storm for winter kill that we're hearing about.
Yeah, I know it's interesting times, that's for sure, for a lot of lakes, and not in the Thompson-Nicola region and in the Caribou, probably more in the southern Caribou, but also in the Okanagan region, as well as the East Kootenays, where we've got a lot of productive lakes over there as well. So we did have the perfect storm last fall. So what happened on many low to moderate elevation lakes, was that we did have an exceptionally warm summer, which carried through right through October. So we had very, very warm water temperatures right to the end of October, right to the lakes froze. So on many, many lakes, mid-elevation and lower in particular, uh, by the end of October, there was still heavy aquatic plant life still thriving. Water temperatures were still in Fahrenheit, were still in the high 40s, whereas they should have been down in the low 40s. And then we had between about November 7th and 12th, we had a cold snap, and the lakes froze. A lot of lakes froze, and so unfortunately, many lakes did not complete fall turnover, which is essential to recharge the entire water column of a lake with oxygen to set it up for winter. So many lakes went into winter with oxygen in the upper layers and not very much, if any, down at deeper depths. Plus, all that green plant life was still well established and thriving. It hadn't started to die off at all. And In fact, I know a lot of lakes, at least in the Kamloops Merritt area, froze up still in bloom. So they still had blue-green algal blooms on them. So it was a bad situation. We knew because of that early ice on and how the lakes froze over that it was going to be a very challenging winter. And so the ministry's fishery staff typically goes out in the third week of February, which is about the peak of midwinter, and when we should see the lowest oxygen readings about that time. And so they tested a bunch of lakes, and sure enough, levels on some of the real popular lakes, as many anglers have seen now because the information is out there now, the levels were extremely low. In fact, when I started seeing the results, I honestly could not ever remember seeing in 45 years of knowing these lakes to have seen levels so low on so many lakes, and on lakes that historically never had issues with any winter kill. And so, lots of anglers are asking, well, is this lake dead? Is that lake dead? Well, we won't know until the ice comes off. And right now, the ice is holding tight on a whole whack of lakes, and so it's just those few low elevation lakes in the Okanagan and the East Kootenays and in Kamloops that are ice free, and it just so happens that those lakes all have decent oxygen levels in the wintertime and weren't affected. So what we're optimistic, I know fishery staff everywhere is optimistic that the higher elevation lakes, regardless of what region you're in, obviously had cooler weather and potentially had a chance for those lakes to have cooled down enough water temperature wise for the lakes to turn over prior to freeze up. And those lakes that were high elevation lakes around Kamloops that were tested had better oxygen levels than the mid and lower elevation lakes. So, I guess what we're all hoping for is that if we see any winter kill on lakes, it's going to be partial kills. But I would expect that we're probably going to see a few complete kills, and let's hope not. But that's Mother Nature getting the last comment in on what's happening. And winter kills, partial winter kills it's not doom and gloom. In many cases, it's kind of refreshing for the lake. You thin the population out a bit, make more food available for the survivors, so the surviving fish are going to grow that much better. And then when you do have a complete kill on a lake, it allows the whole aquatic ecosystem to recharge. the invertebrates, particularly the freshwater shrimp, just rebound so quickly, the populations, because they've been getting hammered by all those years masses of fish in the lake. So it's a chance for the lake ecologically to regroup and basically restock the food cabinet for the recovery stockings that will occur.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And just to rewind a little bit, for people to better understand the scenario with that, scientifically, when plants are still alive or a lake is still in bloom and ice forms, now is it a decomposing plant that's kind of robbing the shares of oxygen?
So right until the lake freezes, all those plants are photosynthesizing and creating oxygen. But once I have a cover of ice and then snow in the ice, those plants die off, and their decomposition strips oxygen out of the water, and also introduces other gases like hydrogen sulfide, methane gases that are building up at the bottom of the lake and are also impacting oxygen levels. So those decaying green plant life, which all during spring, summer, and fall provided all the habitat for all the aquatic invertebrates in the lake that the fish feed on, are now stripping oxygen out of the water as winter progresses, as a decomposition increases. And so that's why that's why that lake needs to go into winter fully charged with oxygen.
Correct.
That's what compensates for that anaerobic decomposition of all that green plant matter, and allows the lake to make it through till ice off.
Very, very interesting. And thanks for kind of, backing that up and letting people understand a little more how these things, can occur. And also, ideally, when we are facing a heavier snowpack and opaque ice into that post New Year's phase, that also lowers the chance of any new occurring photosynthesis, and we're left with a very low part per million of oxygen.
Yeah, normally by February, a lot of lakes, we're done with the majority of our snow. Well, in March we were getting massive dumps of snow, and so in more normal years, by late February to March, it's just ice. The snow is gone, so you're actually getting some photosynthesis through the ice. But it didn't happen this winter on many lakes. I can remember getting 3,300 foot elevation and beyond in mid-March. We had 2 feet in a 48-hour period, and that snow did not go. It didn't melt. It just continued. The cold temperatures just prolonged the extent of that snow on the ice.
Couple of questions continuing on here, because it's a really interesting topic, and I think as anglers progress, it's valuable information for us to understand different environmental changes in how these lakes actually are made up and how our stocking programs and populations can be affected. Question that we've been seeing quite a bit float around through the internet and chats is aeration. Now, is aeration the answer for a perfect storm or a scenario like this?
Aeration. So, in general terms, aeration is prolonging the life of a lake that is ecologically rapidly getting older every year, and it's called eutrophication. And so, the natural process of all our lakes in the interior regions is that they're gradually filling in over time. They're getting shallower and shallower and shallower with all that decomposing plant matter. And eventually, 150 years from now, these lakes that we're now fishing are going to be too shallow to support fish life, and they're going to turn into, big fishless lakes. That'll be and then a wet meadow, and then a swamp, and then they're gone. But that's the eutrophication process. So aeration artificially prolongs the life of a lake, and you can there comes a point as well that aeration just simply won't be enough to keep a lake going. But I think what as anglers, what we all have to understand is that even though we had a tough winter with that lakes not turning over. There in the background, it's a bigger picture. There's so so much so many ecological processes that are impacting the entire ecology of lakes. If you look at many lakes and you look at the watershed, you look at satellite images, and you see how much timber harvesting has occurred in these watersheds. So, removing that timber, compounding it with, we're still dealing with the remnants of mountain pine beetle, and then you add on major forest fires burning, thousands and thousands of hectares. Well, those three processes have a severe and long-lasting impact on flow regimes and water coming into the lake, and the nutrient loading that comes into the lake that is increasing because we don't have a vibrant forest to suck up those nutrients that are being washed into the lake. And so you talk to old, longtime anglers and like myself, I guess. I mean, I remember when my favorite lake, Roche Lake, was a crystal clear lake, never had blue-green algal blooms in it.
Right.
And now that lake it gets major blooms every summer, and the water is not crystal clear. It's got a slight tannic stain to it, and that's because you look at the watershed and what's there for coniferous forests and deciduous forests, and then what the impacts of mountain pine beetle in the terrestrial vegetation landscape has changed significantly, and that all that is in the background, churning in the background, right. And then you throw in some late summer heat due to whatever climate change or whatever you want, and the things that happen this winter are probably going to happen more frequently, unfortunately, yeah. And that's just the way things are.
Yeah, and like I think we've said a few times in conversation, everything just seems maybe we need to get more accustomed to higher highs and lower lows slightly, but with that comes, slightly more extreme conditions. And I think what a lot of people forgot was last spring was the first year from the 2020 forest fires and 2021 forest fires that ground was introduced during freshet last spring. So last year was that year where those lakes were actually fed a lot of that quick runoff and debris in the spring.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Super interesting topic. And, as anglers and as Stillwater anglers, it just reinforces how flexible and optimistic we need to be with choosing lakes and choosing new plans and game plans and where to go and travel.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of British Columbia is that we have a lot of lakes.
Yeah.
A lot of productive lakes throughout the interior regions, all the way right there from the east and west Kootenays, Okanagan, all the way up through Region 7 north of Fort St. John. And so, we need it's a prime opportunity now for anglers to do some exploring. If your favorite lakes in the Kamloops Merritt area or the Southern Cariboo have been impacted, then there's other lakes that we can all venture out and do a little exploring and try some new water.
Yeah, you bet. And like you said, if anyone's traveled or talked to people that live in Europe or the States, we're incredibly lucky with the choice of Stillwater selections that we have in every region and micro region. It's incredible. We have a question coming in, and maybe let's talk a little bit more about now, moving forward kind of provincially, some of the game plans with stocking and the scenario that we're facing with inventory. But the question comes in, it says, are winter-killed lakes normally restocked with fingerlings or catchable size?
Well, in a perfect world, we would have an unlimited supply of catchable Fraser Valley strain. Unfortunately, isn't an unlimited supply for them, and so they're rationed out each year to the different regions. And So some of the highest priority lakes, if they winter kill, and they're high, the high effort lakes, then they'll get an opportunity to get out, a couple thousand perhaps catchables, but it's not a unlimited supply in the region. And so what we'll try to do is put yearlings back into the lake in those productive lakes, and those yearlings by fall will almost be catchable. And going forward from the next year, though, the lake will be those fish will be in prime shape for the following spring. But the bottom line is there's not a lot of catchables available because they need so much room in the hatcheries to grow. There's only so much room in a hatchery, and we have to consider that the majority of fish that are raised in the hatcheries are Penasco and Blackwater horsefly, and they're by far the majority of strains that go out in the lakes. And the catchable trout program originally and still was designed for the urban lakes in the Greater Vancouver and Southern Vancouver Island, and so we get a few for emergency use up in the interior regions for winter kill, but unfortunately we can't rush in, and much as I know the regional fishery staff would love to have that capacity, they just don't have that ability.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I guess, aren't as informed, but the majority, I think it's 100% of our license fees goes to the Freshwater Fishery Society, which again funds these hatcheries and these programs. And it's so important that people are getting anglers into this hobby, and licenses are being purchased, and that this program keeps rolling and rolling.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's 100% of your license revenue goes to society, and obviously the majority of it's used to deliver the provincial stocking program. But there's also substantial amounts of money each year put back into the fisheries in both large lakes, small lakes, and inland rivers for enhancement programs. Also improving access to lakes, docks, and improving recreation facilities at the lake, boat launches and campgrounds, projects that partner with provincial sites and trails and regional tourism sectors and local fishing resort operators, things like that. So it's a good thing. All that money goes directly back to your fisheries resource in one form or another.
Yeah, super important. And if people do the math here of what's going on, and ideally, long story short is we may not have the inventory that we would normally have provincially to cure a few winter-killed lakes, immediately rush in and put catchables in. But looking long-term, this is great news and concerns to larger fish, and maybe some of the fisheries that were designed as, heavily stocked put and take fisheries that may be getting less fish, and ideally turns into a handful more of quality fisheries in the province.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, we have. The bottom line is we have lots of other opportunities.
Right.
So while some of our favorite lakes may be impacted, they're going to get a bit of a break. The invertebrates are going to get a bit of a break, and in a year and a half down the road, they'll be back in prime shape.
Right. And it's also a good time. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some of the smaller, less fished lakes, some of the small boat and float tube accessible lakes. Yeah, moving higher up onto like the Highway 24 area, or looking maybe into higher elevations, more difficult access. Would that be, as an angler that's facing a change of plans, where historically they've always gone to, one of these high angler use lakes, now they're looking for kind of a plan too. Was that something that you would suggest?
Oh, absolutely. It's not that much further to be traveling from Greater Vancouver, Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, to start looking into the Southern Caribou, Middle Caribou areas. There's lots of small lakes up there that are perfect for car toppers, small john boats, pontoon boats, U-boats, float tubes, things like that. I started using my little John boat more and more the last couple of years, and revisiting lakes that I haven't been into for quite a while, because you get pretty comfortable fishing out of a bigger trailered boat. But it's I've had some phenomenal fishing on some of those smaller, less pressured lakes because of the
Absolutely.
access. Access might be a little more difficult. You might have to, lock in your front hubs on your truck for,
Yeah.
and but there's lots of opportunities there. There's no question.
Yeah, you bet. And it's always it's refreshing to re-challenge your skills on a new body of water and get back to that ground zero learning place with exploratory fishing. I know myself, anytime I go into a new body of water, there's that element of observation is right at the top, and you feel like you're back in it in a very observing kind of situation, and it's a great way to re-explore fisheries. What are some of the best resources out there now? People are going to be possibly looking further or just, continually fishing the lakes that they are. But other than, say, the backroad map books, there's some good online stocking reports that you can kind of use to gauge what kind of fishery you potentially be looking at.
The backroad map books, the map books themselves, but also their fishing map books are a tremendous resource. And then they're also partnering, with Fishing BC and putting out these waterproof maps. In this one in particular, the Fishing Highway, with lots of accurate, up-to-date information on access roads and stocking information, things like that. So you take that, and then you can go online to the gofishbc.com. You can look at stocking rates for all the lakes that are stocked in the province, and then as an angler, you need to consider the regulations, that the regional regulations, and you'll see the lakes. If you're looking for quality fishing opportunities, for instance, those lakes that have reduced limits, gear restrictions, winter closures, things like that, they're being managed to provide a bigger product, a bigger fish for the anglers that are visiting. So just those several resources, you're putting that information together. Your local fly shop, your local fly and tackle shop, and then of course there's lots of online information available as well. So there's no shortage of information out there to help anyone plan their first trip or their 150th trip to existing well-known fisheries or to a more remote fisheries. The information is there.
Yeah, that's great, and that we do have access to so much more than we used to, and it's nice the fishing backroad map books that things have been updated, and even along here on Highway 24, there was 4 new lakes that had over a dozen new campsites and some with docks and launches put in. So it's a constantly we're having new areas accessible, and it's great to see. Also, just so everybody knows, we'll be following up in May with a live stream and talking more precisely about the Caribou region, because things right now look like we're about possibly 3 weeks behind what's going on at the same elevation in Region 3. So if you're following Fishing BC, we'll have a May live feed that will be more specific about, again, what's going on here in the Caribou, South Caribou, and Chilcotin areas. So Brian, we're just going to do a couple questions about some new flies. Let's get to the terminal part, some of the fun stuff. We got past the winter kill and the stocking and the lakes and geographically some of the destinations. But let's talk about some of the things that you've been concocting over the winter about techniques that you're maybe wanted to finely tune for 2023 that you were evolving from 2022?
I think the biggest, the biggest innovative tying um, accessories that have come online in the past couple of years has been these tungsten uh, bead heads. They're the Canadian landowner, they call them head turners.
Hmm.
Hairline calls them insta jig heads, and Togans has they're called jig off heads. So these oblong shaped or irregularly shaped tungsten beads will allow you to tie a balanced shrimp, leech, damselfly
Hmm.
uh, pattern with using a 60 or 90-degree jig hook, and
Yeah.
it's been a game changer. Uh, Balanced leeches, balanced damsels, even balanced mayflies, uh, balanced dragonflies, balanced minnow patterns. We had to tie them before with the pin sticking out the front, and it was a pain in the neck. Plus, those things would get caught up in your net, and but these head turner or other these offset tungsten bead heads uh, um, are making it so much easier to tie them. We can tie much smaller hooks, and they just sit in the water perfectly. Uh, and the, Complementing those tungsten offset beads are the wonderful color selection in straggle strings and brill
Hmm.
that companies like Semperfly and Upavon and other companies are putting out that allow you to get so creative with suggestive patterns,
Right.
suggestive leeches, suggestive damsel, shrimpy things. And, when the trout see those things dropping in the water column and they're under an indicator and they're balanced and they're going like this, it's a little more harder for them to resist.
Yeah, excellent. And it's so great to see how quickly the fly tying game is evolving. And the winter we get to see so much of these innovations, and we're getting inundated now with all of these, spectacular pieces of art that are, going to be great fishing patterns. And
Yeah.
now, in concerns to with a lot of what, up the downturned eye and that different type of jig head tying. What are some of the techniques for the newer anglers? Why is that? Why is that so beneficial that we can have patterns that are balanced?
It's just a balanced pattern just provides a more natural movement to your fly, particularly when you fish them under a strike indicator, which that technique is so effective for so many trout and char food sources in lakes. And that's simply because 70% of our fishing is done in 20 feet of water or less in most trout lakes, and so you can fish these things, fish that depth zone comfortably with a floating line with or without a strike indicator, and using strike indicators, especially with things like chironomids, there is no easier way to learn. And you don't necessarily have to use a fly rod with all these balance leads. You could
Right.
be using a ultralight spinning rod with a slip float and putting these same flies down and having as good or better success. And it's a great way to introduce someone to fly fishing or to start fishing flies in lakes.
Hmm.
And you want beginners to get hooked right away. And uh, uh, ultralight spinning rod and slip floats and these flies it's a great, or chironomids under, it's a great way to introduce anglers to fishing.
Yeah, I love it. And a lot of people do forget that, for beginners or taking kids out or family members, that just because it's fly only doesn't mean that you're only using flies. And to experiment as well with these different types of um, tide patterns, whether they be head down, balanced, using floating lines and indicators, and just a whole different selection for our fly tying materials.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so let's just so everybody knows our sponsorship for this live feed. is Mustang survival, and we're really thankful for them to be on board. I'm just going to start the conversation and just recap, and some that have been following some of the vlogs may have seen a video that I posted last year, but I'll quickly kind of go over the situation that occurred, and we're going to talk a little bit about water and boat safety, and it's an important part of our of the adventures that we take and our sport, and something to remember. But last fall, and it was right in that phase that we were talking about, as it was still warm out and things were just starting to cool. And in front of the resort here, we had a full resort, and I'd say about 400 yards away out front, just off of what's known as For Sale Island, there was a small boat spotted, and one of the guests, Graham here, a guest of Piney Point, came into my office and said, "Hey, I'm pretty sure I just heard faintly the word help." And we both kind of ran out to the shore and looked, and sure enough, there was a small dot of a John boat situated just off of For Sale Island out here. So we jumped in my larger boat quickly and ran out to sea as another lake boat was kind of heading in that direction from the shoreline here. And sure enough, what we had encountered was an individual that had fallen in the water. Sunny t-shirt kind of day, but the water temps weren't that situation. So I came up along the port side of the boat, and I saw two shoes kind of floating and sticking out that side, and I came around the starboard, and there was an individual clinging with one hand to the boat at that point in sheer desperation. Just this part of his face was left, and there was left sticking out of the water, and there was no chance that this man at his condition now would have been able to pull himself back into the boat. The key things that occurred there was no life jacket, there was no whistle, and he was extremely lucky that somebody heard that help. And what I thought for a long time there was, if anyone was running a vehicle here, or if a chainsaw was running, or music was playing, or it was a windy day with the wind heading in the other direction, no one would have heard that. And this is an important topic, and it really set home for me to see that. We pulled the individual on board, which was extremely difficult when someone has no more strength left. You only really have their clothes to grip onto, and it's dead weight. And it really set home for me. I've fallen in the drink a few times, but nothing to that extent. And after we released some of the footage, a lot of people had messaged me and said how seeing that and hearing that and observing it hit home. And I think it's a good time to talk about personal flotation devices. We're getting into the season again, and people get pretty complacent that these life jackets are things that are shoved in compartments or used as maybe seat cushions. Let the viewers kind of know what some of the equipment is that when you're guiding or when you're out boating, Brian, that you use.
Well, you definitely have to have that minimal emergency kit in your boat, mandatory, which is your bailing can, a whistle, a floating recovery line, a little buoy on it, and a flashlight. But by law, we're required to have personal flotation devices. And so it's either the hard foam ones, or you can wear an inflatable, like the Mustang and inflatable life jackets. So if you're in a boat and you are legal, if you're in a boat and you have the hard foam life jackets, they can, as long as you're in the boat, you're legal. You don't have to be wearing them. But if you have only the inflatable ones, then you have to be wearing them. And it should be mandatory. You have to wear whatever all the time, but you have to be wearing that inflatable one. And so Mustang makes a variety of comfortable inflatable manual ones or automatic ones, inflating ones that that's what I offer when I'm out in the boat with guests, I offer them the inflatable ones to wear, and they're comfortable, and
Hmm.
they're gonna save your life if it's cold. It's early
Yeah.
season fishing. That water's cold, and we need. It doesn't take much.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening when it's t-shirt weather and you see people kicking back and enjoying fishing, and then they hit that water and the temperatures change and things escalate quickly. I recently picked up a new model, and I was just going to show this to everybody here. This is kind of a hybrid, and it's a super thin combination of the two. So it's also a manual inflatable vest, or that's where you pull to activate the secondary inflation, which is inside of it. But at the same time, it also has a thin, very comfortable level of foam flotation as is. So it's kind of a dual, and I'm pretty excited about that. It fits really well. And there's a few different ways to look at these personal flotation devices, and there's ideally just the regular one, which I don't think I'm recommending as much as I did before, which is just the manual inflate. I think, I don't know your thoughts on that, but maybe go a little further into
Typical
this.
manual inflatable one with the pull cord on it, and then there's also there's these minimalist belt packs that you
Right.
can wear as well. And again, they've got the pull cord too, the manual pull cord, and then there's the auto, and like very similar to yours. These are another streamlined type of jacket with the pull cord tucked away so that it doesn't get caught on your fishing line, be it spinning line or your fly lines, and
Right, or the net.
like this guy here is very comfortable and doesn't restrict any of your arm movement when you're casting, and so they're just so handy and to wear that there's no excuse not to be safe out there. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that just for a minimal cost compared to some of the reels and rods that we collect and things that we have to get yourself fully protected for all situations. And the reason why I chose the Chimera, which is kind of a hybrid, is I have a center console boat with a jet drive, and we do run smaller rivers sometimes. And if there was the event of an impact and maybe I was knocked unconscious or had a serious injury, I'd still be floating, so to speak. So it's a good topic. It's a tough topic sometimes to talk about, but after seeing what we experienced last year firsthand, and also letting people see some of that footage, definitely sets home, and something that is really important.
Yeah. The other important thing to note about these Mustang inflatable jackets is that if especially if you're wearing an auto inflate one, if you get knocked out of the boat, when they inflate, they self-right you so that you're face up.
Right.
And so there's accidents happen and people get ejected out of boats, or if you're in a river and you hit a rock or a log and you get ejected outside of the boat, or knock yourself out hitting the windshield of your boat, when these auto inflates go off, you're going to self-right. So
Right.
Unfortunately accidents happen, and
That's right. Yeah, and we just wanted to make sure that we opened up those topics. It's just something that needs to be talked about more often and not just chucked under the seat. And B, we want everybody to enjoy and have safe and sound trips out there angling our wonderful waters in BC. We're going to wrap this up soon here, Brian, but let's jump ahead now and talking about back a little bit more about the exploratory areas. Is there any regions that you're perhaps excited to perhaps visit in the Stillwater category this season if you get a chance?
Well, I'm so close to the Caribou region. I'm going to be certainly poking my truck up there with the little John boat. and I really do love the East Kootenays.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful part of the province, and some beautiful Clearwater marl bottom lakes there, which I really like sight fishing. But you get that in, we have that here in Kamloops, also in the Caribou, and so it's kind of, get in the truck and point it in a direction, and use some of those resources that are available to all of us to help put an itinerary together.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just kind of scrolling through some of the comments here. We also have some products that because we were, wanted to talk about safety. We also have some products that we're going to be giving away towards the end of this live feed here. I'm just communicating down below with home base there. Back to techniques. Now, we talked more about those flies, and I know everybody loves talking about catching techniques. Brian, is there any new or innovative fly lines or fly lines and techniques that you're excited about kind of fine tuning this spring season?
Well, I think, because again, we focus so much of our spring fishing and, even through the majority of the season with you fishing with strike indicators, that all the major fly line companies now, Scientific Anglers, Rio, Airflow, are all producing lines designed to throw into cast indicators with minimal effort, and a line that will suit every rod. And so, unfortunately, gone are the days when any line will fit, any 6-weight line will fit every 6-weight rod.
Right.
So, because we have such fast action rods now, that you need to take the care to visit your fly and tackle store to take advantage of their knowledge on what fly line design, what taper is going to best suit the rod that you're casting, so that the rod will load the line and those indicators will go out there. And one of the biggest things I think fishing with strike indicators, anglers need to understand is you don't need to throw it 70, 80 feet. You can't see it. You need to be able to see that indicator because so often the bites are so subtle that the indicator doesn't dunk. It just quivers. It just moves a little bit left or right or vibrates, and you have to be on it. And so if you're so far away and there's a bit of chop on the water, you're gonna miss a lot of bites. And so
very important.
Fishing naked, floating lines, long leaders, casting boobies, casting leeches, dragons, bomb it out there as far as you can. And wait for it to sink, and then do your retrieve and cover, because you want to cover more water. But with indicators, you got to keep it closer, regardless of what pattern is hanging under there, because you have to be able to see the indicator.
Right. Hey, I'm going to throw a couple questions out there straight at you, and I'm sure that if people could pipe in here, they'd be asking the same thing. I'm going to throw a couple scenarios out there and see your opinion. So say we're heading to a new lake, body of water that we haven't fished tomorrow. Ice has just come off. What's your first go-to, setup in concerns to rod, line, and pattern for this right after ice off?
So it's just after ice off, and we're
Yeah.
on a lake we've never been on. We do have a depth sounder, so we can find the drop-offs, or if it's clear lake, we can see them. And I mean, the first, I'll set one rod up with the indicator, and then I'll have a rod set up with a 5.7 full sinker. And under the indicator, it's going to be a ruby-eyed leech or a vampire leech. The vampire leech is going to have a chartreuse green head, and the ruby-eyed leech will have a copper or gold cone head on it. And I'll be hanging that under. Those are two very good searching patterns. And then on the 5.7, I'm putting a tequila booby on it, or I'll put on a deer-haired gompus dragonfly nymph, and I'll be casting over the edges of the drop-off and bringing it up. And while I'm doing all that casting, I am looking for moving fish.
Right.
I want to see 2 fish, 3 fish move, and I'm out of there. I'm moving from where I am to where those fish are, because you have to remember early in the spring, you'll not be fortunate to have some chronomets coming up, and you'll see the shucks, but more often than not, they're feeding on bread and butter food sources, scuds, baby damsels, baby leeches, things like that. And so you can, and it's, it's hard for fish to refuse a fast strip booby, passing quickly through their territory. And you get the most aggressive fish in the lake mad, and they see that thing and they go out to kill it. And, that just means a fish on the end of your line. So,
Right.
but you're always scanning the water, looking for shucks, but looking more for fish, rolling, porpoising, even free jumping. If they're not doing it where you're doing it, you need to pull anchors and go to where
Well, there you go, folks. You heard it straight from the man. The two go-to setups at a new lake just after ice off, and super valuable information and a great way to search 2 different approaches: one hanging, one swimming quickly, more on the shelf, one down deeper, and kind of a seek and destroy. I like the 2 fish rule, though. Is it 2 or 3, Jump?
Oh, I'll even move for 2.
Really appreciate it. Great information, Brian. And as always, thanks again for jumping in on our Fishing BC live feed. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. It's a pleasure to shoot videos with you. Here's cheers to a great, successful Stillwater season. And folks, thanks again for jumping in. Just as a reminder, we will be following up in May with another Fishing BC live feed, more focusing in on the Caribou and South Caribou, as well as the Chilcotin region, and give some updates with the lakes and conditions out there. Well, thanks again, Brian.
You bet, Brent. We'll see you on the water soon.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining in, and you have a great early season Stillwater situation. Thanks, folks.